great to be part of this great organization and to be part of PRIME. I am really thrilled that they offered me to lead the board. I hope that everybody can see now my screen. Again, thank you very much for honoring me with the chairmanship of the board of PRIME. It's a great organization, great initiative of the United Nations. It is the largest organized initiative with management-related educational institutions. And again, you all know what these principles stand for, but with method and with the new board that we have created over the past few weeks, we hope to really make a global movement and thought leadership on responsible management education. We really hope that we'll be able to transform business and management education and achieve the goal of developing responsible leaders for today and tomorrow. Here is our new board. I'm very, very honored to be working with these great individuals and to be working with Meta as well. And obviously with UNGC, with Sando Giambo. Here we have Anasa Okonodo from the Lagos Business School, Asilbek Kochahmetov from the Almaty University in Kazakhstan, Haipent Huang, who is from Peking University, the Center for Green Economy Director. Stefania Giannini is coming from UNESCO. Norman Arruda Filho is coming from Brazil, the ISAA, Brazilian Business School. Lisa Frohlich from Cologne Business School. James Walsh from the Ross School of Business in University of Michigan. Paul Polman will be joining us as a founder of Imagine, but of course we know Paul very well as one of the authors of the Sustainable Development Goals and Vice Chair of the Global Compact. Belinda Gibbons is a senior lecturer at the University of Wollongong. Urs Jagger from Costa Rica. Tima Bansai from Canada, founder of the Network for Business Sustainability. From Oikos International, we have Sophie Cherwa and Andrew Wilson from EMBA. We just convinced Jekong Kang from AIM, the Asian Institute for Management from Philippines, to join us, and Ranjan Banerjee as well, the Dean of the SP Jain Institute for Management Research in India. And probably we'll add a few more names, but I'm really excited that people are coming from all over the world to join us in this quest to change management education and improve the way that we lead companies, create companies, manage companies. We are working still with a method to develop the strategy going forward. We will have our first board meeting at the end of August just to get to know each other. But roughly speaking, there are three buckets or three priorities. First, we want to look at the organization, how we are organized globally, and to optimize the government and operations, and to strengthen the collaboration with key stakeholders. I mean, obviously the management schools, but also we have partners in the media. We have other organizations, accreditation organizations that we want to work with. We want to clarify what we really stand for, and we really want to put PRIME in the forefront of any business school and any community out there thinking about the role of business, to think about our principles, our 6 principles of responsible management education. And of course, ultimately, we want to create impact. We want to have PRIME growing, and also we want to measure how PRIME is actually impacting these schools around the world, and ultimately the students and the thought leaders from various countries. So in the next few slides, I just want to show you my thinking about all these issues that we're facing with the need to change management education. At INSEAD, I have been serving as dean since 2013, so 7 years now. And in the last about 5 years, I've been talking a lot about business as a force for good. And business as a force for good is an important way of thinking about the role that we have as business schools, as management institutions. Now, I'm a macroeconomist, so I have to show at least one macroeconomic graph in my presentation, whatever the presentation is about. So here is actually the world GDP per capita growth since year one. There's no such thing as year zero, but it looks nicer there until today. And what you see in this graph is that the first 18 centuries, from year 1 to year 1820, the average growth rate was 0.02% per year. And since 1820 to 2020, the average growth rate was 2.2%. And we know that the last 200 years have been absolutely transformational for the world. Lifespan has increased, health, well-being has increased, improved around the world, and so on. Of course, this growth is also accompanied with a lot of not so good outcomes or byproducts, which I will discuss later. But now let me just focus on this part of business as a force for good. If you look at the world in the beginning of the 90s or in the 80s, there'll be over 2 billion people who lived below the extreme poverty line of $1.90 a day. In China alone, in 1980, there were 850 million people who were below $1.90 a day. Today, there are less than 20 million people. This is a miracle by all standards. The last 30, 40 years have been absolutely unprecedented in the way that poverty has been reduced. Today, we know that this year might lead for the first time to a reversal of this trend, but we do hope that this will be only a temporary and will be corrected soon in the coming year. But that's certainly a very serious thing to be concerned about. Now, when we ask ourselves what happened in China, why all of a sudden this growth and this poverty reduction happened, at the end of the day, the only way to reduce poverty in the long run is economic growth. Without growth, without job creation, poverty will remain at very high levels. And we know that the only way to have economic growth is to have business creation. It could be state-owned enterprises, it could be private enterprises, but you do need managers who manage these organizations in order to generate growth. So business as a force for good has two interpretations, and the first one is the very narrow one that basically says if we want to eradicate poverty by 2030, we need economic growth and we need business creation. Unfortunately, this great story about business as a force for good is not the whole story. It doesn't work so well as we would like it to work. And more we see out there people being unhappy with capitalism. We see people being unhappy with climate, with injustice, with racial discrimination, racial injustice. So we start asking ourselves the question, what is going on? Why this great story about business creation leading to growth and eradicating poverty is not convincing everybody that capitalism is really working? And the answer is because it doesn't. And I think that there are a lot of failures that we see in the current form of capitalism. I mean, still, it is the system that we have embraced and we continue developing, but it is time to rethink the way that capitalism should be working. And this is a study by Edelman, and the trust barometer shows that 56% the population believes that capitalism does more harm than good in the world today. There were a lot of articles, a lot of discussions in the last, I would say, 8 to 12 months. I've never seen Financial Times, with a cover like this. with a letter from the editor saying that we need to reset capitalism. A lot of global leaders have spoken in the past 12 months. Larry Fink, Mark Benioff, Jamie Dimon, the Business Roundtable in the United States, 181 companies signing all these. In Davos this year, there was a new manifesto that was published by the World Economic Forum about the role of companies. And the manifesto says a company is more than an economic unit generating wealth. It fulfills human and societal aspirations as part of the broader social system. Performance must be measured not only on the return to shareholders, but also on how it achieves its environmental, social, and good governance objectives. So what we have seen in the past few years is that even though there is a marked improvement in the well-being, in the living standards of many people, trust in business has eroded, and it is time to act. Many companies have started to embrace these ideas, but unfortunately, in the last 2 days, as we saw in the celebrations of the 20 years from the establishment of the Global Compact, the data is not that great. 92% of the CEOs believe that sustainability is critical to business success, but only 48% are doing it. And only 21% believe that business has a role to play in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. In a session on Monday, Clark Murphy, the CEO of Russell Reynolds, presented a report which basically said that when they look at 4,000 specifications for the top management, top executives, only 15% made reference to sustainability. And in fact, only 4% actually had experience and mindset as a requirement for the person that they had to hire. So things are not moving as fast as they should. So today, when we think about business as a force for good, the narrow view of business creating jobs and welfare is not sufficient. We need to have a broader view of business as a force for good, where the value creation that they do for the company also takes into account the impact that the decisions we make as business leaders have on society and the environment. So we need to change mindset and to create new norms. The good news, in my view, is that there is a big movement behind this. And I think that, to me, the Sustainable Development Goals offer a really good framework of thinking about this. So what are these 17, colored boxes doing out there? From my point of view as an economist, the way that I interpret them is that number 8, which probably not by chance was put in the middle, is the one that actually economic growth is the creation of value, is the creation of jobs and so on. Of course, there are a lot of targets behind these that talk about decent work, about youth employment and so on, but this is the engine. And when you think about the rest, they basically tell us where our current market system, our current mindset, our current norms are failing. No poverty is a failure, or poverty, the existence of poverty is a failure of political systems, is a failure of politics, is a failure of policies. Zero hunger is a failure of markets. We know that there is enough food for everybody, but today we do not have food for, many people actually starve. When you look at goals 13, 14, 15, these are externalities that we create in the process of growth. So at the end of the day, when you look at these goals, they're basically telling us, yes, we need to generate growth, but we have to take into account all these other things where we see failures. And I want to end, of course, with a quote from His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to achieve the world's goals, but we cannot do it unless everybody plays their part. We cannot do it without the private sector. Business must deliver on their commitments to the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. The reason that I want to end with this is because, to me, this is a special time. The UNGC, I think that for the first time, and I can be corrected if this is not the case, but I think that for the first time, our expectation is not that governments will do everything for us, because the standard solution in economics is taxation, regulations, subsidies if you have market failures or externalities. But we have to go beyond the government, and business has to play a role as well. And for us, as academics, as leaders of business schools, we have to ensure that our students, our participants understand the role that they have to play. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you in the next few years, and to figure out how we can actually make sure that all these things become indeed part of the curriculum in every business school out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilian, very much for these strong words, and for making it very clear to all of us that impact on society is more than profit. And we will indeed explore how we can, even more than what has already been done, integrate that into the thinking and the action in Prime. Thank you very much, and again, a very, very big warm welcome, and thank you to you for stepping in as chairman of the Prime board. Now it is my great pleasure to, after having welcomed Ilian Mihov as the new chair, it is my big pleasure to also say a goodbye, or maybe hasta la vista. At the very least, say a big thank you to Ms. Danica Purg, who is the president of CEEMAN and the president of IEDC in the Bled School of Management in Slovenia. Danica has, since mid-January and until very recently, a few weeks ago, served as the acting chair of the Prime Steering Committee. It has been a challenging task that has been navigated with a very firm and steady hand from your side. So it's a true pleasure for me to welcome you, Danica Purg. Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Mette. I'm really happy to get the floor at this great event, and to greet everybody and to thank everybody. As you mentioned, 6 months. It's a short period, although it can be long one too, sometimes in the life. But in these 6 months, I think that with the team, with the Interim Management Council, and with Mette's help and support, I was really succeeding to do something. Something what you saw already partly on the picture of Ilian Mihov, the actual, in fact, I can say the idea was that I'm today presenting and passing over the function. So the result, as I said, it's also the great board, which you have seen on the pictures of, and the people I shall explain you a little bit the principles, how we came to that, because this is very, very important to know. You know, because then you know what you may expect from them. So when Lise Kingo, now already the former CEO of UNGC, called me and wrote me firstly in November and then in the middle of December, and telling me that I should support the transition of Prime, I of course immediately said yes, because I was already, as a CEEMAN president, member of the board and president of the board in 2013. So I followed the organization, and I was for some years quite active in the organization, and I knew how important it is. Being an educator and one of the probably oldest deans in the world, I established the school, the first management school in Eastern and Central Europe, 34 years ago, when the word management was still, in fact, not well regarded. I really have a dream that the management education and principles of responsible management education are becoming, as somebody said already now today, is becoming a required part of every curriculum in every educational institution. And that is what I'm sure that Ilian and the team and Mette, of course, will work for it. So what I did first was that I created an interim management council with the help of the office in New York. And with their, not only support, but a little push, I have to say, from time to time. And so after hearing and listening, in fact, listening a lot to less satisfied and to more satisfied people in Prime, I got an idea what it should be done. So firstly, I appointed the Interim Management Council. And then thinking who could be in among these 7 people, I went to the roots of this association, of this organization, of Prime. And I was inviting in David Cooperrider, professor at Case Western University, who was in fact one of the people who established this organization. And I was there at this conference when that happened in Cleveland. And so then I asked Nicola Klein, Dean of Gordon Institute of Business Science in South Africa, because she also that school works so much on principles, on realization of principles of management, of responsible management education, working a lot for equality of black and white in South Africa, etc., poor and rich. And that school is bringing so many young people in their school to teach them about entrepreneurship. Then I was inviting Lisa Fröhlich, the president of Colonia Business School from Germany, the school that is every year organizing a fantastic conference and doing so much, publishing so much on sustainable development. Then Andrew Main Wilson, with whom the president of the CEO of AMBA, with whom I worked a lot in management education in the future, and ideas about that. And he was also the last chair of Prime and of steering committee of Prime, where I was a member, and as I mentioned already. And so I said to myself, somebody who knows how it was and how to do it further, etc. That's very good too. And then Belinda Gibbons, the senior lecturer from Sydney Business School, from Australia, of course, and Norman Arruda de Filho, who is a great, I think, the most well-known figure in Latin America in this field. So we had some meetings and we set the principles. And the principles was, and of course, Mete was always present and helping and supporting very, very much. So we were trying to stick to the original idea of Prime, and that is to make Prime again a movement of schools, their leaders, professors, who are committed to the main Prime principles, and to make it a thought leader, to make Prime a thought leader and an action leader, somebody who would create a big impact on management education. But don't forget also on this, all kinds of ratings and rankings where we are very dissatisfied with, because they should really pay more attention to the schools, how they educate ethical leaders. This we may not forget. And while talking about that, I would like to really to ask you all, how much did you express your dissatisfaction and your disgust, I would say, with what is happening with racism at the moment in the world and in the United States especially. But that is happening also on other places, which is not an excuse for anybody. So we have to help students to create awareness, to become active in all this, not only to show their respect for principles of responsible management education, also by action. So a thought leader and an action leader. And so you saw on that beautiful slide of Ilian Mihov, that there we were talking taking into account inclusivity, geographical and gender diversity, successful leadership in Prime projects, academic and business collaboration, etc. So everybody, all the world is presented, and I'm so much, firstly, thanking everybody for help, and then I'm so much wishing you a success in all your future endeavors. And whenever you need me, I shall be there. Thank you very, very much, Mette, and thank you all very much for your support.
Danica, thank you so much. So I said wrongly that this was a goodbye. It is indeed an hasta la vista, and I know that you are there and always into the future also a very strong support for PRIME. So thank you so much for that. And now it is my great pleasure to actually introduce to you Ms. Stefania Ganini, Assistant Director General for Education in UNESCO. We could not imagine a better person to step into the PRIME board and also to be with us here today to support the PRIME course and to help us establish even better PRIME as a global movement for responsible management education. So it's a true pleasure, Stefania Ganini, for me to introduce you and welcome you to the PRIME stage. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's really a great pleasure, a great honor, let me say, to be with all of you today, also in my new current position of a member of the governing board of PRIME. And I think that this global forum is very much timely. And let me first of all congratulate the incoming executive director and CEO of the UN Global Compact, Sandro Giambo. I could hear words as all the other previous speakers on this important day. And let me say that this day coincides with the virtual convening of an influential educational community. You know, a lot of students, professors, researchers, and deans from business schools, universities across the world, committed to responsible management education. And I would like to dedicate my few remarks on the question of the role of education in this big mission we have within the 2030 agenda and SDGs as a whole big project for a better society. And let me say the learning establishments may still be closed down, but a radical rethinking of what many are already describing as the world after. The world after this crisis is thriving. Disruption has been one of the key concepts we heard many times during these last years, running through global conversations for many years as the digital revolution against space and economic integration accelerates. Never has it been so clear, so tangible as in education, affecting virtually every country, every family, every single student, individual. And let me remind you that at the highest peak of the COVID-19 crisis in education, when schools and universities were closed, we could see 180 countries more or less decided to close, to shut down their school systems, affecting consequently 1.6 billion students in the world. That means 92% of the global student population, from the primary schools to university level. And this is simply unprecedented in the history of education, I should say in the history at all. And this process has led to an acceleration never seen before in the deployment of inclusive learning solutions and in leveraging technology. This is an issue we talk very many times in conference discussions, also planning programs at university level as well. But now it's time really to concrete give solutions in order to fill the gap. Another key word that we put in practice and pronounce many times through the last 3 months is agility. Agility has become a new modus operandi where it might be least expected in governments as in the UN system as well. From the outset, it was clear that the response to the crisis, the response demanded the new alliances and new ways of acting and new ways of thinking as well. This led us as the UNESCO, as the agency of the UN responsible of SDG 4 monitoring and coordination process to establish the Global Education Coalition, now counting over 100. We are almost around 130 partners, not only from the UN system, the multilateral community, but also from the civil society, foundations, and private companies as well. The aim is, the purpose is to match country needs with talent, expertise, competencies, and resources of partners. And this is a very quite innovative way to go. Let me underline this point. We have to capitalize on this new innovative partnership, which puts around the same table the UN system, multilateralism, and the private sector around the same mission. And the speed at which partners came on board, private ones in particular, testifies to the value of that education carries for every society. Without such alliances, the challenges will remain very, 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 very much unsurmountable, I should say. I could single out the area of connectivity, because learning overnight has become entirely reliant on it. We estimated that close to 500 million students simply have had their education interrupted because of the learning platform were the only option in place, and they have no internet to access them. Nearly half, more or less, of the world students have no access to internet or devices. And this divides both with other inequalities that are still amplifying the learning crisis more than it was in the recent past. And let me say clearly that fallbacks in education jeopardize the future of our economies and weaken the resilience of our societies to future shocks. Either we talk of, a second wave, other health crisis, or some other big issues, big challenges we are supposed eventually to face in the future. I will argue that education must not only be an integral piece of the recovery, but education has to set the course of for a paradigm shift in our development model. A paradigm shift we need, and this is very much, I think we can say that this is very much about being more inclusive, about becoming more resilient and more sustainable globally. And reports presented to the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit this week, all of them call for more ambitious actions to meet the objectives of the 2030 Agenda. The summit focused on healthcare, of course, inequalities, and climate change, calling for transformational business leadership. There is no question, in my view, that this starts with education. And I really commend PRIME for its long-standing commitment to lock sustainability into business schools. UNESCO has collaborated since many years. There is a long-term cooperation with PRIME. I can mention going back to Rio Plus 20, where the Higher Education for Sustainability Initiative has been launched. We also cooperated with them starting from last year during the Hunger Week. And PRIME was also one of the key partners in our global action program for education for sustainable development that has supported millions of learners and educators all over the world. Climate change and rapid environmental degradation remain an existential threat. We know this is a simply crisis of survival. And political economists and Financial Times journalists, I want to mention something I had the opportunity to go a bit through this week. Marty Sambu makes the case in his recent interesting book for an economics of belonging. I think the main sense, the main meaning of this proposal is to win back the left behind, with education and upskilling being key to his plan. I think we had to be inspired a bit from this message and vision. and ensure that business school and the higher education, generally speaking, weigh in heavily in our collective capacity and in our collective responsibility, because it's very much about taking a collective responsibility today. Your schools and institutions somehow nurture the talent, skills, mindset to tackle the complexity and also the interlinkages and interdependent challenges of these current times. I see this new ethos as one that fosters collaboration over competition. And it is this kind of special ethos that factors the SDG vision and ambition into all aspects of decision making. I think it invites a new interdisciplinary, cross-sectorial, experimental approach, but the real message we have to send is about putting at the very core of our mission human well-being, environmental sustainability, and fighting poverty. This is about taking care of the planet, of people, and looking forward to a new model for prosperity. It should promote open science. It should promote open educational resources as the main means to share knowledge for development. Most fundamentally, it takes, I could say, as a starting point, the impact of innovation and decisions on individual lives, on our health, on our environment, and on our common future. So more than ever, we need the business schools and the higher education on the front line. And when business schools and higher education institutions will really relaunch their mission around programs focusing on sustainable development goals, they are leading a shift, a really important shift in values and priorities. And we know that we face tough times ahead with recessionary forecast, the threat of job losses, everything that is around, the new reports and projection that also from our research are coming out in cooperation with our partners from the World Bank, UNICEF, and others. But our times call also for global cooperation, for creativity, for a new kind of solidarity. And this goes beyond the crisis. This is very, very much the message we would like to send you, and assure that this constituency we have today in the audience is a big part of the solution. So what do we need? I think we need the business leaders and schools on board to defend and promote quality education. We need the business leaders and schools on board to join in transforming education. Transforming education as education itself is the most powerful transformative driver for development. And we need definitely business leaders who can act to make our economies green and our societies fair. The previous speakers mentioned the question of racism and what we're looking around us, not only in the US, unfortunately, in these recent days and weeks. And I think that it's very much important that we put education and education in its humanistic vision, which is very much UNESCO mandate and vision, at the very core of our vision for the future. And also the role of business school can become a university, a very critical one. So UNESCO is here to support your prestigious schools in your commitment to sustainability. And very much thank you for inviting me, and I'm very proud to be a new member of the board. Thank you very much, Matt. Over.
Thank you so much, Stefania, for these kind words and these strong words about the transformative power of education, which we, of course, truly agree with and believe in the Prime community. Thank you so much for this, and I look very much forward personally to work with you and to get to know your team in the UNESCO much better in the immediate future. Thank you so much. So this was a wonderful introductory welcome, a little intense at times, if I can be honest, but we managed to get through and get all the important voices that we had planned through to you. And had we now been in a, could say, normal conference setting where we would have been physically in the same room and we could have been more face-to-face, we would have gone out together, networked, and had a cup of coffee. This is not the case for now, since we are in this new world of the virtual conferencing that we're all exploring. So what I would invite you to, or what I will invite you to next, is to join us for the next plenary session this morning. But before I briefly introduce that, at least the moderator of this session, I want to remind you that after the plenary session, we have, as you've seen in the program, 2 slots, you could say, where we have 3 plenary or 3 breakout sessions at the same time. So the first breakout sessions will happen from with business and business schools, where we will talk about how Prime and Global Compact work together and could potentially enhance that work together. We will have student engagement on the SDGs as a special deliverable from our student, our very engaged student community. We will have a more practical carbon literacy training from some of our colleagues. This has been highly recommended by everybody who has participated in this particular carbon literacy training. I know you can't spread yourself over 3 fantastic sessions at the same time, but please rest assured that we are recording everything, so you can get back to this at a later stage, that session or those sessions that you missed out on. Then we will have another round of 3 parallel sessions. First, we will have the Prime Champions for the SDGs. That has will sort of introduce, we will launch the blueprint that has been elaborated and developed based on our Prime Champion partners. We will have the Imagine If Sustainability was mainstream in management schools, where we try to think aspirational. We will then have the Prime Community Toolbox on the SDGs, where we will dive into the Sully test and the SDG dashboard to get to know those tools that are highly recommended by those schools who are using them and engaging with these tools. And then we will round off the day as the very last session with reflections from someone who's been following all day, and they will come with some sharp reflections from today, what was particularly inspiring over these hours that we run the Global Forum today. So first, I'm very, very pleased to invite you to hang on here to the plenary session, where we will have with us here Dan Thomas, who is the Communication Director at UN Global Compact. Dan has, over the past days, as you may know, those of you who have also followed the UN Global Compact Leader Summit, he has been working non-stop for 26 hours. I hope you got a little sleep, Dan, in between then and now, on the Leader Summit, where I think we had about 23,000 participants joining force here. So that was a huge blast. It was a huge success also. But thank you so much, Dan, for also leading our next, or our first actually, multi-stakeholder high-level panel for the Prime Global Forum. Over to you, Dan. Thank you.